Good afternoon everybody and welcome to Studio 5 going live. It's a relatively dull day in London, a little bit humid, a little bit sticky, and I've got the fan on because I'm also drying some clay, so I do apologise if there's any background noise. Today what I thought I'd like to do is share with you how I edge pair leather. I suppose when I was at college, when I was learning nearly 30 years ago now, I, like a lot of people, was taught, in the UK at least, was taught to use a spoke shave to thin my leather down for covering books. Now, for the last 45 minutes I've been trying to find my spoke shave, and unfortunately I cannot find it. And I can't actually remember the last time I used it, so maybe it's not surprising. But for those of us who don't know what a spoke shave is, it's basically a carpenter's, or I should say a wheelwright's piece of kit, and it looks rather like that. That is a spoke shave, and it's used by wheelwrights to make spokes, and some bookbinders you modify it to use with leather. And if we look at the Arthur Johnson part, and you can see that there's Arthur's hands using the spoke shave. I have to say that I never really got on terribly well with it. It took me some time to learn how to do it, and I was never very happy with the results. And I now know that there will be some people sitting back, arms folded, going, well, of course, it's traditional to use a spoke shave. I've been using a spoke shave and it works for me. That's great. I know it may be traditional, but living in caves is traditional, and I actually don't live in a cave anymore. But that's my opinion. It wasn't until after a couple of years after leaving college that I was introduced to French bookbinding by my good friend Atsushi Ito, and he taught me French bookbinding, and it was great fun, and it was a real eye-opener because of course all I knew about was English bookbinding. One of the first revelations that came about was that the leather that was in the studio was already split to the thickness for covering. Now, what do I mean by split? Well, normally one would get one's skin of leather, and it could be up to 1.8 millimeters thick. And generally, we don't want it that thick to be covering books with. It just makes it too stiff to use. And so you would use your spoke shave to thin the leather down. However, what a lot of people do all around the world is they send their leather off to a company, and the company will literally split the leather using a machine with a knife in it, and you end up with a piece of suede, and you end up with your leather split to the thickness that you want. My word, that saved many, 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 many hours and tears, and there was no holes in the leather. And secondly, when you'd got your book up to ready for actually putting the leather on, you would get your leather, you would then mark up using a biro around the boards. You would then cut the leather out to the size that you wanted. You'd then send it away to a company, and they would thin the turn-in edge down for you. Again, this was a revelation. And it was done with a machine that was basically sort of like a fine grinding wheel that would take it down. And all that one had to do was literally take off the step. Now, what do I mean by the step? Well, let me draw it out for you. Diagram time on the back of the menu. Basically, if we're looking at the leather, what would happen is the leather would come back, and this is the profile of it. It's looking something like that. So this is the hair side, that would be the outside of the leather. And this is the flesh side, that's the inside of the leather. And the area here is this area here, and you end up with a step, and then with your paring knife, you literally just pare that edge off there, so you've got a nice gentle slope. And it means that everything's a prescribed thickness, and it's just so much more precise and accurate. And I was wowed at this, so thank you, Atsushi. I think it's always very important to acknowledge where you've learnt techniques from and your tutors and everything, because they've taken the trouble to teach and, you know, pass on skills and everything. And sometimes teachers do get forgotten. For example, who knows about Roger de Coverley? Now there's a name for you all to study and look at perhaps. Now, and what basically one does is you edge pair the leather. Now, traditionally, again, one would be using a very big litho stone to be pairing with. I use a piece of toughened glass. It's far easier to keep clean. It's got two surfaces I can use. It's easier to store, and I've got lots of them. And then basically what you do, and forgive me if I look a bit cack-handed, I am doing this a little bit cack-handed so you can see what I'm doing. You edge pair the edge of the leather. And it doesn't matter how you edge pair it, if you use a bit of old, you know, steel to do it with, a straight blade or round bladed knife, it doesn't really matter. we can do that. Now, this is the time when things are going to go wrong. So I actually have prepared this edge just in case it all goes very, very wrong. But basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to be thinning this edge down to the thickness that I want the leather to be using a tabletop paring machine. Now, I first sort of did this more than a quarter of a century ago. God, that does age me, doesn't it? And I had a Brockman paring machine. And I know there are many, many different sorts of paring machines on the market. And I know that some of you are by now going, that's too expensive for me to buy. Well, don't go on holiday for a year, perhaps this year. Save the money and buy one. Or if you're in a group of people or you belong to a club together, buy it together, share it out, time it out, and that sort of thing. Basically, this is a Sharfix, and we've got our razor blade just down here. And then we can alter the distance between the anvil wheel here and the razor blade here using this little knob here to lower and raise the blade so I can get the correct thickness. Now, as a little tip for you, get a piece of waste leather, the same thickness, and just pass it through the machine to make sure it's actually going to be taking off the amount of leather that you want, leaving on the desired thickness of leather. Now, for health and safety, of course, don't use your finger, use a brush. And use a micrometer. This is how accurate you can be to get it down to the thickness you want. And I wanted about 0.45 of a millimetre, so that's okay. A couple of hundredths is okay for me. Okay, so another little tip as well. Don't go into it full hog. What I'm doing is I start the leather from the back, move it forward so it's not going to be, the blade isn't cutting, and then I can start taking the leather off. You'll notice that I'm only going to be taking the leather off along this edge so I can physically feel what is happening with the leather and also how sharp or dull the blade is. If you take the leather through at an angle like this, the leather swarf, as it were, peels off to one side, thus keeping the blade clear so you can actually see where the edge of the blade is. So once again, feeding it through, just gently taking it off incrementally, not rushing it, taking my time. And it's at this point here I wish I'd changed my blade. Probably here it's getting a little bit blunt. Now, when I'm putting this through, another important little tip when using paring machine, of course, keep your left hand low and your right hand low so that you're not pulling the leather up. You're sort of pulling it so it's stretched. They're not pulling it too stretched over the little anvil that you'll have. And now what I'm doing is I'm going as close as I can to my biro line. Now, I'm used a black biro to mark this up so that you can see it quite clearly. Normally I would use a lighter coloured biro, and you can get, one of those biros with multiple colours in it. And the reason I don't use a Chinograph pen is because it's waterproof and a bit claggy. Biro line, it's far more solid, doesn't run around. So there we go. So that's the leather pared down. Made a little bit of a step there, but I should be able to take that out with my paring knife. And this is what I mean about, going live, things are going to happen. Now, to do the end bit here where I've been holding it, move the blade up, slide it in. And this, again, is another way of just paring the leather down so you can be accurate as well. So there's always more than one way of using the same piece of equipment. So that's basically the edge pared down. And I think you can see the difference in colour between here where we haven't pared it down and here where we have. Okay, that was easy, wasn't it? Well done, everybody. And please note, no holes, but it could all still go very, very wrong. Now, what I am going to do next is I'm going to be paring this little step out. If you remember from the little diagram I did, wherever I thought, yeah, that's it, just there. We've got a step in the leather just here. We've got a little bump, and I want to take that out so we get a free flow of the leather going over. So when it goes over the board, there aren't any lumps or bumps. Okay, so I just do that with my paring knife. This is easy, isn't it? The secret is to keep putting the biro line in so you can physically see it. So once again, what I'm going to be doing is I'm just putting the biro line in here. We'll just do this one here, and I might as well do the emergency edge just here. Look at that. That's easy, isn't it? No problem there. And then, again, using my sheet of glass, let's get that down into position. Check that there's no obstructions or anything on it. Try not to blow the dust away because it'll go everywhere. But what we're looking to do is we're just looking to take the leather off just in this little step here, just where this biro line is here. So hopefully everybody can see what's happening. And little sort of sound bite I have when I'm working with leather: whenever you stop, strop. There we go. So now what I'm going to do, and this is again, this can be where it all goes very, very wrong, is I'm just going to take this line off here. So working over the edge of my bench, I'm just going to literally just take off the leather. Now can you see that the leather's being taken off in this area here, but not in the turning, because that means the turning leather is still thinner. So what I'm doing is I'm just incrementally going to bring it down. Be careful of the corners. Don't over pair the corners, so you end up with really thin leather there. Nice and gentle with it, keep working it, and eventually bring your blade over. So now we're pairing where the biro line is, and you can begin to see that disappearing. Stretching it over the bench a little bit so you can keep it nice and taut so it doesn't start pulling up. And look, we're now beginning to get rid of that step. We can see that biro line gently disappearing. Sensitive movements with a knife. You're not Zorro, you're more like a surgeon. And what I'm doing is I'm feeling the leather to feel that the step has been taken out. Keep dusting down. Looks for brush desperately. Can't find it. Uses sleeve of coat. Keep dusting down so you don't get any leather caught underneath here or any dust, because that you'll just make a hole straight all the way through. And once again, just finish off going in this direction. And it's as simple as that. And I'm doing this under quite a lot of pressure because I'm going live. And I haven't made any holes, which is quite remarkable really. So nice and gentle with it, and you just work your way around the leather, taking that step off nice and gently. You can be so accurate with your blade, with your knife. You can see I'm just taking that off now. So that step disappears. So we're getting a nice gradual finish to the leather. Nothing sort of lumps and bumps. It's smooth. Of course, if you want it to look lumps and bumps, leave it as it is, I suppose, or use a spoke shave. But having said that, I once had a student who said that he liked to see the lumps and bumps because it showed that it was hand done. I then suggested that we all take turns with a hammer of putting dents in his car to make it look handmade, at which point he said no. So there we go. So we can feel that that's very smooth, so that when it is applied to the board and it's turned over, the transition between the paired turned in edge is seamless, it's smooth, and that's what we're after. So that's something that I learnt, probably, maybe I would never say invented, I think that would be terribly, terribly wrong. It's a sort of a series of events that led up to me using this technique. I'm even hesitant to saying developing it, so I'm sure somebody else will take credit for that. But it's a very accurate way of working, and it's a very accurate and sensitive way. And you'll notice that the leather hasn't been stretched at all. It's still the same size as it was when we started. Anyway, that was a little bit about leather and how I do turn-ins. I hope you enjoyed it. I've still got all my fingers, which is always a good sign. And once again, thank you very, very much indeed for your time and patience. Let's be safe, let's be careful out there, and I look forward to seeing everybody in the not too distant future. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. And this is Studio 5, and we were live.